All right, so we've talked about a lot of stuff that we sort of agree on. I haven't agreed with everything, but I'm letting you talk. People always yell at me. They say you don't yell back at your.
Well, let's do the spicy stuff.
Let's get into some other stuff. So the gay marriage thing. Let's talk gay marriage.
Sure.
You're not big on gay marriage.
No, I'm not on a social level. I think the government ought to be completely out of the business of marriage. I think the government sucks at everything, is my short message for today. The government is terrible at everything. If the government's goal was to forward traditional marriage, it utterly failed, obviously, as proved. But
you don't mind it being out of the business of traditional marriage at all, right?
No, I think the government should be out of all marriage. I think the government stinks at this. You know, now, I will say that, do I think that I think the idea of the government subsidizing gay marriage is silly because I don't think that there's societal benefit to gay marriage. If you're going to make the argument that government should be involved in marriage at all, which is not even an argument with which I agree at this point,
but it's the way it is right now.
Right.
So let's just go from that.
Okay. So
that base.
So before I get there, one quick point. The reason I want the government out of the business of marriage is because now that the government has enshrined gay marriage, the next step is going to be going to religious people and telling them they have to engage with same-sex weddings. So as a religious person, this is problematic to me. I want a society in which I can do what I want, and I don't have to care what you think, and you can do what you want, and you don't have to care what I think.
Right.
That doesn't mean you get to come into my synagogue and get married. It also doesn't mean that I have to go to your gay wedding.
Right, and that's an interesting place to have the discussion because I would argue for gay marriage for the exact reasons. I don't want the government involved in all of these things, and that's exactly why gay marriage should exist. And I think if Rand Paul had hit that point harder, it would have made a sensible libertarian argument for limited government. And you know what? You want to marry a dude? Go ahead. And you want to smoke weed?
You're right. Well, I tend to agree. Both of those things I agree with. And by the way, I find people who smoke weed unbelievably irritating, but that's not my business. Right? I mean, this is the beauty of America is you don't have to give a crap what I think.
We usually end the show by taking a bong hit.
Oh yeah, well. It's going to be awkward then.
Okay.
But as far as the secondary argument about let's take the predicate that government is now involved in marriage.
Yeah.
Should government subsidize gay marriage and straight marriage the same way? My answer is no, because the only purpose for the government getting involved in marriage is the procreation of the next generation and the raising of that generation. And it's my belief that a man and a woman do a better job of raising a child and producing children, obviously biologically, than two men or two women.
But isn't the child part of it sort of secondary? I mean, there are plenty of people that get married, gay couples and straight couples that don't have kids.
This is societal
marriage in and of itself isn't just about.
But at a governmental level, I don't care about those people. Or meaning, like, I care. I'm happy that they're happy, but I don't really care what they do. Like, it doesn't. The government theoretically has an interest in the production of the next generation.
Right.
Right. That's the only interest in marriage. So, in fact, you could even make a case that the government ought to be giving, basically tax benefits for having kids, and no benefit for marriage. Right. But the truth is, the reason that this was created in the first place, obviously, is because before the advent, long before the advent of modern birth control, the fair assumption was that if you were having sex, then you were going to get pregnant, right? At least if you were having straight sex, you were going to have pregnant. You were going to get pregnant, and thus we wanted to incentivize people to stick around for that because single motherhood is bad for the community, and so we were going to subsidize that with tax benefits. By the way, there is no marriage benefit. There's a marriage penalty. My wife and I pay a significantly higher tax rate because we have a combined income.
Right. So you're not against. So despite coming from some sort of.
This is not a religious argument.
So I don't make a religious argument. So that's what I want to distinguish because because we should be for separation of church and state, and I think you are for separation of church and state.
So the separation of church and state means, I just want to make a quick distinction. Separation of church and state doesn't mean that I can't bring my religious values to bear in how I vote. It just means that I can't leverage Jewish ritual on you. There's no establishment of Jewish religion or Christian religion, but I should be able to make a secular argument for why what I'm saying is right, is my general rule, because otherwise we're operating in different spheres. If I cite the Bible, it makes no difference to you. You don't care about the Bible.
Right. So I'm a secular Jew.
Right.
I would consider. I'm an atheist, so it's irrelevant.
Right. So your Judaism is ethnic and irrelevant in every other respect.
I like Curb. You like Curb?
Who?
Curb Your Enthusiasm.
Oh, well,
No.
I mean, that's cultural Judaism, like bagels and matzo balls. I don't care.
Still pretty good. All right, okay, so let's not get hung up with that. But so you're making the distinction between this isn't coming from a religious place. Now, I think part of the problem when it comes to gay marriage is that a huge portion of the Christian right is trying to impose their religious values on this. So you
but
are
the policy
making
itself isn't religious.
But the but I want to make
rationale for the policy. This is where I'm making a distinction.
Yeah.
The rationale for people voting can still be religious, but if the policy is not religious, if there's a secular rationale, this is what Scalia said about it actually. If there's a secular rationale to it, then the motivations of the voters don't matter. Like I don't care what the motivation of the voter is in virtually any circumstance. I matter what the vote is. Right? And if somebody wants to vote for lower taxes, I don't care whether they're doing it because they're on principle for lower taxes or whether they personally want lower taxes on their income. I just care about the outcome of the vote.
The outcome of the vote. Okay, so basically you don't care about gay marriage. As this country stands right now, you simply don't care. Your one concern, though, is that ultimately this will lead to the government forcing gay marriage on synagogues that don't want to have it or mosques that don't want to have it.
Yeah, not ultimately. Like now, in California, they've already passed laws that you have to teach same-sex marriage in public schools, for example. Like, it changes the nature of the teaching. My view on that is I don't know why I went to public school for elementary and part of junior high. I don't understand why the government is teaching me anything about this stuff. This is for my parents to teach me. Like, this is a values thing. Right.
So I guess that's sort of where it's just values just get conflated with what we're taught. Like, it's just sort of a...
Yes and no. I mean, there are no values to math. Right? There are no values.
Well, math, right, but
there are no values to biology. There are values to history, which is why it's dicey and it's disingenuous what the left has done with the education system. There are multiple perspectives on history, and the monopolistic takeover of the liberal arts is a real problem.
Yeah.
And you can have multiple perspectives on that, but we're not teaching marriage in the context of history or English. We're teaching it in the context of science, which has nothing to do with anything. And again, a PC comes in. I mean, when they were doing sex ed, when I was in junior high, they were making a big deal out of the idea that everybody is equally likely to get AIDS, for example. Not true. I mean, it's just not true. But AIDS is a behaviorally driven disease. Right? I will never get AIDS, right? Barring a blood transfusion that has AIDS. I don't do intravenous drugs, and I don't have promiscuous sex. And I was a virgin when I married my wife, and she was a virgin when she married me. So we're safe.
Yeah.
Right. we're good. We're about as safe as you can get on this. And so I don't like the facts being trumped by what we wish the facts were so that we could push certain political agendas.
Right. So how do you then, taking this argument from a secular place, how do you then feel being in the same party of so many people that are taking it from a right-wing Christian place? Because there's a seemingly odd alliance there that I think is...
Not really. I agree with them on the end point. I even agree with them religiously. I just don't think they're good spokespeople for their cause. I mean, I think that if your chief citation to your opposition to gay marriage is Leviticus 18:22, I don't think that that's a solid argument that's going to convince a lot of people.
Right.
I think that there are better arguments against gay marriage than that.
Right.
And so this is something I talk about at religious schools, and I've been asked by pastors and rabbis and priests to talk to students about, okay, you have these religious principles. Is there any justification outside of the Bible says so for why this is correct? And as a religious person who's actually thought through his positions, I tend to believe there is. Like, as a religious person, I believe that God didn't create stupid rules. So if you believe that God didn't create stupid rules, then you have to come up with some sort of justification for the rules that are being expressed. Like, there's some that you can't understand. That's just an article of faith. But the big ones about human behavior, there should be a decent rationale you can explain to people who don't buy into revelation.
Sure. So there I would just say, well, you're basing your belief in God. It's just a belief, not anything that could be proven. So
right, but that's every belief system.
So no. Right. But anyone that's basing anything on religion is just basing something on some unproven thing.
That is
so I would say I want that nothing to do with my life.
Which is fine, and that's why we live in America. Good. But I will say this: every belief system is based on something unproven. All of them. Human rights means nothing. Where do you get your basis of human rights?
From a feeling. How about that?
Well, exactly. Which is subjective.
I handed it to you.
Right.
Well, right, but that's a blend. So you're saying basically where the liberals would say, I'm for this because I'm for gay people. I want gay people to be able to do what they want to do and pursue happiness like anyone else. You would say, well, just this has nothing to do with government and whatever. So there's not a lot of...
No, there's not a lot of conflict here.
Yeah.
In my governmental policy, because I'm basically a libertarian, is I don't care about that.
Yeah.
I mean, again, the government...
So what do we do to strengthen that group of people? So clearly we don't agree on...
It's getting there.
We don't quite agree on this thing, but I understand your rationale, and you're not trying to stop gay people from getting married.
I think right now, I think right now the next conflict is not going to come from the right. It's going to come from the left pushing the ball, meaning that it's going to come from the case in Oregon with this baker who doesn't want to service a same-sex wedding, doesn't want to actually have to cater it.
Yeah.
Right. I think that good-hearted people should say, fine, you do what you want, go across the street to the bakery. Like, who cares?
That's what I would say.
Right.
Like, I'm not forcing.
This is the difference between a liberal and a leftist.
Yeah.
In a nutshell, this is the difference between a liberal and a leftist. A liberal says, your business, I don't care. A leftist says, no. I think it's imperative that you will be made to care, right? In Eric Erickson's phrase, you'll be made to care. A man will come to your house with a gun and he will tell you that if you do not cater this wedding, they were forced to pay a $175,000 fine for not catering a lesbian wedding. Right? There's a bakery across the street. This this is really nefarious stuff. So this is where you're asking where the momentum comes from?
Yeah.
This is where the momentum comes from. So when I make an argument to conservatives and religious people that the government ought to get out of the business of marriage, I'm not saying that because I'm pro-gay marriage. Right. I'm very much anti-gay marriage in the social sense. I don't think that you know, as a religious person, I think homosexuality is a sin. I think lots of things are sins that people engage in. I think they should be free to engage in them. But as a religious person, that's not my thing. I don't think that gay marriage is a great, massively good thing for society on a social level. But on a governmental level, if you guys don't just get out of this business entirely, the left has no endpoint. Their only endpoint is using the government as a club against you. So now that they've got gay marriage, it will go to we're going to stop accrediting schools that don't teach gay marriage or hire homosexual employees, right? And you've got Catholic churches say, I don't want to pay the health benefits of somebody's gay partner. That's a Catholic church. Why should it have to, right? But the left would say, no, they have to, right? Yeah. You will be made to care. You're a bad person if you don't do this. And so what my argument to the right is...
This is where I'm a sensible liberal. And it's
right, exactly. So this is... Yeah. But this, you'd actually get heavy argument from the not-so-sensible liberals, probably including all of the Democratic nominees. The fact is that what I'm saying is the best argument for the libertarian position on the right here is going to be a rearguard action. It's not going to be, it's better for straight people and it's bad for gay marriage to get it out of that realm. I think that if you want to fight against gay marriage, do it on the social level with your church, teach your kids what you want to teach them. But when it comes to making this argument to conservatives, the real argument is if you don't take power out of the hands of government, if you don't take that ring away from Gollum and throw it into Mount Doom, then it will be used against you. The government is the ring.
So does this, my direct message at the top of the show, I was talking about just how stupid our election system is and how everything's down to sound bites and everything, you know, our debate is so nonsensical and all that. So everything you just laid out there is a much more clean and clear explanation and where you actually are separating church and state and doing the intellectual rigor to make a sensible argument, where if they talk for the little bit that they've talked about gay marriage, which I'm glad, because I don't think it should be talked about that much, let it be, and that would be fine in my opinion. But nobody, you know, Marco Rubio will talk about the family, but he's purely doing it from a religious perspective.
Well, there's an identity politics that's been created on the right in response to the identity politics of the left. So if we're going to be attacked as religious people, we have to talk as religious people, right? So I have to go preach from a pulpit, and if I don't cite, Genesis to talk about a man shall leave his parents and cling to his wife, if I don't cite that, then I haven't spoken the in code that shows that I care about the values of people like you. And this is the way the political game is played. So again, I sort of wish that Americans would see through the political game on all sides, meaning I wish religious people would just say, I agree, I understand you're anti-gay marriage, and I also understand what you're doing here to protect religious people, and you don't have to cite Bible verses at me to prove it. And you end up with idiocies like Donald Trump on stage waving around a Bible, pretending he gives a damn what's in it.
Right, misquoting.
Right, after 2 marriages and several adulterous affairs and bragging about having his experiences with married women, standing up there with the Bible and going, this is an even better book than The Odd of the Deal. It's like, if this is how you vote, if you're able to be pandered to that way, that's a sad commentary on American politics. And in its way, it's really no different from Hillary Clinton going to the black community and saying, you're the victims, and now I'm going to speak the language you understand. Here's how you know that I care about you.
Yeah.
I'm not big into caring. You know, I think that people who pretend to care about you are generally people who want the power to control your life. The only people that I want power in their lives, and they want power in my life, are my immediate family. That's it. You know, my parents, my sisters, my wife, my children, and they're independent human beings too, right? So caring is the way that the left controls. Like they don't come with the jackboots first. They first come and they say, we care so much about you, we have to do these things for you. And by the way, we brought some guns to help out. Right,
so it shows sort of the beauty or the scariness of identity politics, because it sounds really good. I guess that's why they always say socialism will come with a big smile, right?
Yeah, exactly. This is Jonah Goldberg's point, liberal fascism, yeah.
Yeah, all right, so we only have a couple minutes left, but let's just knock out a couple other things. So I saw when you were on Piers Morgan with that whole gun thing way back when, and I watched it again in preparation for this. And I never liked Piers Morgan. I thought he was doing a talk show the wrong way. I hope people don't view me in that way. But what you did with him in the argument was really kind of brilliant. And it goes to some of the 11. Well, and before I even let you say anything, I don't really agree with your stance on guns. So can you sort of recap what happened, and then we'll...
Sure. Well, first of all, like Trump, now that you've complimented me like Putin, now you're a good person. Now you're a good person.
See? You see what I did there? I told you I read the rules.
It's all good. So what happened in that debate is that Piers Morgan had basically been doing a lot of the things we're talking about. For weeks, he'd been saying after Sandy Hook that anybody who disagreed with him on gun control, the only possible reason to disagree with him is because you don't care about what happened on gun control. And you saw Barack Obama do this, after the last mass shooting, right? After Umpqua Community College, and he got up there and he did the teary-eyed routine, and I don't like tears. Stop. Like, just give me your policy. Yeah. So what I said.
You think he faked the tears? People were saying he touched his eye in a weird way.
I don't think
he was tearing out over here.
I think Obama is an unusually skilled politician, and I think he worked himself up to tears. I think that good actors can. I think that, the idea that the emotion is fake is, I don't think the emotion's fake, but the emotion of actors isn't fake either. If you talk to actors who work themselves up to tears, they actually feel sad when they are crying. Mm-hmm. That's how you get yourself to cry, right? I think Obama worked himself up there. Otherwise, he'd be crying.
He's a method actor.
Well, otherwise he'd be crying every other press conference. I mean, he's talking about all sorts of crap that goes on in the country that's terrible. Like, how many, every time he gets out there and he talks about the economy, he'd be crying. I mean, he'd be completely emotionally unstable. It's one of the two. So what I said to Piers Morgan is, I said, you're a bully, and the way that you bully people is you stand on the graves of the children of Sandy Hook to push your political agenda. And he didn't know how to come back from that, because that was his entire strategy, and now it had been unmasked. And actually, during the break, he had planned to bring in a kid who'd been shot and was in a wheelchair and say, well, you've said it to me, now say it to this small pool child. And he couldn't do it, because if he had done that, I immediately would have said, first you stood on the graves of the kids, and now you're standing on this poor guy's wheelchair. It's terrible. But it's so that was sort of the content of the argument. He tried to throw the Ronald Reagan was in favor of banning assault weapons at me. I don't care, as I've said, what Ronald Reagan had to say. He's a guy. Sometimes he's right, sometimes he's wrong. Yeah.
So he wasn't a god? Is that...
Yeah, exactly.
You're confirming that.
As a religious person, I only have one in Reagan.
Not him.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay, so that's not the one. We knew that. I knew there was one.
Exactly. Right. It's just not Reagan.
It's just not Reagan. Okay, got it.
And I know, because he's not back, right?
He could be. He could be.
Weird, but
so my feelings on the gun thing is that basically, because I believe in the Second Amendment, people should have access to guns. It's clear after an hour together, I'm not a huge fan of the government, so I do believe people should be able to protect themselves and all of those things. What I think is that we should be able to control it a little bit more than we are. I think that the NRA does wield too much power. And then I would say at the same time, as I always like to say, two things can be true at the same time, we have a massive mental health problem in this country. And that's the part that we're not talking about, because every commercial for every cable news channel is for some other drug that it turns out that some crazy percentage of these shooters are on. Right.
So when it comes to gun violence, there's two problems. There's inner city violence, which really is a matter of gang violence and people shooting each other, unfortunately, because they're involved in gangs.
And this is what's happening every day in Chicago, but never makes national.
And Los Angeles and Washington, D.C. and all the major cities. I mean, this is all the heavily gun-controlled areas, Democratic areas. These are the places where people are getting killed en masse. And then you have the mass shooting issue. And the mass shooting issue is largely because in the 1960s and 1970s, this is the one area where I think the government actually should be involved. In the 1960s and 1970s, there was a decision that was made basically all across the country to empty out all the mental facilities, because there was an idea that went around the country and gained a lot of traction that mental illness was basically one flew over the cuckoo's nest. Nobody was seriously crazy. Everybody was just eccentric.
Right.
And this is why you have a mass growth in homeless people. In 1960, how many people do you think in 1960 were in mental institutions in the United States?
I mean, I can't imagine. I would guess
500,000.
Yeah,
half a million people. 500,000 people, right? And we had half the population then, right? Today, there's 25,000 people in mental facilities. So you've got a lot of violent people on the streets. And so you have a lot of violent people on the streets, you're going to end up with more mass shootings. And that's why every time there's a mass shooting, almost invariably, it's somebody who is crazy, and we've known they're crazy. And involuntary commitment laws are really, really difficult, because you have to show that the person is a threat to themselves or others, as opposed to the old standard, which was they're incapable of caring for themselves. One of the big problems with paranoid schizophrenia, which has afflicted a lot of these shooters, is that you have a condition where you literally can't even recognize that you have the condition, so you won't take your drugs. If we let you out, you'll just go off the drugs and you'll go right back to doing what it was that you were doing in the first place.
But even the drugs often is part of this. Well, so it's people that are off the drugs, and it's people that are on them.
Most of the people who are committing these acts are not on heavy medication. Most of the people who are committing these acts are people who've gone off their medication and they have significant mental illness and they need to be medicated. So, this is an area where the mental health system is dramatically underfunded. The laws are complete. When it comes to people who legitimately cannot cannot take care of themselves. I'm speaking as somebody whose grandfather was a schizophrenic who went into a mental hospital. They gave him lithium, and then he spent the rest of his life as a happy, productive human being. Right? These are things that might not have been possible now, and so this is an area where I actually think that there is a role for the government in this, because John Locke would have thought the same. John Locke said this in his writings. He said that the problem of mental illness is one that sort of falls on society as a whole, because you have a group of people who can't take care of themselves. That's the real problem with mass shootings. Taking my guns away from me or taking another law-abiding person's gun away from them, that's not going to stop the mass shooter. In fact, it's probably going to create more mass shootings, because now I can't defend myself.
So would you say the NRA is a problem at all within this?
I think the NRA is an incredibly valuable organization, because it's pushing against people on the other side. I don't have to agree with everything the NRA says to think that they're an incredibly valuable organization that's channeling the legal hopes of a lot of Americans to protect the Second Amendment. And we're about one vote away on the Supreme Court from the Second Amendment disappearing entirely. So that's a little scary.
All right, so let's just do some Supreme Court stuff, and that's how we're going to end this. So with this whole thing with Scalia right now and this spot, where do you stand on this? It seems to me that Obama has to nominate someone. That's his job. He's the president. Are you with me so far? He's the president right now.
He can. He doesn't have to.
But it's his job. Of course he will. It's his job, and if it was a Republican,
of course he will.
Right. Okay. And now that it's up.
And I don't care if he does. That's as you say. He has the capacity to do it. It's one of the only things that he's actually allowed to do as president that he's doing, as opposed to all the other things he's doing, which he's not allowed to do.
But we got to finish up, so we have to focus on this one. So, all right. So we're in agreement on that, and then it'll be up to the Senate to either confirm this person or not.
They don't have to give him an up or down vote, though, right? I mean, they can do whatever they want.
So what do you make of the Mitch McConnell and the rest of these guys that are like, he shouldn't even nominate anybody and all that?
I think it's an idiotic line of argument. I mean, I think it's a really dumb line of argument. Listen, I went to Harvard Law School, and I wrote my third-year paper at Harvard Law School on the idea that Marbury versus Madison was wrongly decided. I don't think that the Supreme Court should have the capacity to decide for everyone. Like, for conservatives to think that the entire future of the Constitution rests on one guy not dying is really sad, right? And the reason for that is because the Supreme Court has now been seen as this great moral arbiter. I don't think it is. I think that the Supreme Court has been responsible for some of the worst decisions in human history. I mean, the Supreme Court is responsible for Roe, which is a disaster. The Supreme Court was responsible for Plessy versus Ferguson. Everybody always wants to talk about Brown versus Board. If they'd gotten Plessy right in the first place, you don't need Brown versus Board, and segregation ends in 1900. So the Supreme Court is a serious problem. There are 9 unelected people, which I don't even care about the unelected, but they're 9 people who are given the power to control everybody's life in the name of a document that most of them don't even take seriously.
So is that the irony with the Supreme Court, that they're supposed to be above partisan politics, and yet the whole system to get them there is partisan?
And they're partisan themselves. I mean, Elena Kagan is a hardcore Democrat. Elena Kagan was the Solicitor General for Barack Obama. Come on. I mean, she was the dean when I was at Harvard Law School. She was a hardcore leftist then. The idea that people are free of politics, I'm what they call a legal realist. I believe that virtually everybody has their perspective on life, and that comes out in how they adjudicate. And you have to work very hard to remove yourself from that. I think most judges don't. I think most judges rule based on what they feel. Like Anthony Kennedy, you can't tell him, regardless of what you think about same-sex marriage, you cannot tell me that the Constitution of the United States, or the 14th Amendment thereto, which was ratified in 1868, was demanding that the states not pass laws in favor of traditional marriage. That's absurd.
Well,
it's absurd.
No, but equal protection, he was using that argument.
Right, and you can't use
the equal protection argument that we should all be treated equally.
But it's a bunch of crap, because equal protection does not mean that a law should have an equal effect on everyone. No law has an equal effect on everyone. The question is whether the law itself discriminates against someone on the basis of an immutable characteristic. And one of the problems with the whole gays are blacks is that gays are not blacks. I mean, the fact is that a gay person who never has sex with another man is not going to manifest their homosexuality in a way that society cares about. They may be gay, they may have sexual orientation.
That's a guy who's going to shoot up a place.
Well, maybe he will, maybe he won't. I mean, I assume that for the last couple of thousand years, when gays were not treated well in Western society, that not all the secretly gay people were going and killing folks.
But
I think more of gay people than that. I think that that gay people have the same self-control that straight people do. I don't think they're any better. I don't think they're any worse in terms of their sexual self-control. I will say that I think men in general are less good in terms of sexual self-control than women. So, which explains why.
Agree on that.
Yeah, I mean, which is why gay men have sex with more people than straight men, because women don't want to have sex with men as much as men want to have sex with men. Men have strong sex drives.
Right.
So, yeah, but that's well off topic. Back to the Scalia for a second.
Yeah.
The problem here is that the Republican Party, when they say things like, it's the timeline, it isn't the timeline. Okay, if somebody replaces Justice Scalia, who's of the left, and I don't care when this is, if Hillary gets elected, if we're 20 years from now, one more vote on the Supreme Court, and the leftists on the court do not see the Constitution as a piece of law, right, to be interpreted like the Sherman Antitrust Act or like Obamacare. They see the Constitution as a piece of poetry to be interpreted as their feelings dictate. And this is the point that I'm making about Kennedy.
This is the through line through sort of everything we're talking about.
That's right. And this is the point that I'm making about Kennedy, specifically in the gay marriage decision. There is not one iota of evidence that the law, that when it was written, meant anything to this effect, or that it meant to leave an open space for the Supreme Court to come in and leverage down on states same-sex marriage. Laws mean what they mean when they're written. They don't mean what they mean 200 years from now. If somebody picks up this interview in 200 years and starts to read into my perspective that I'm super pro-homosexual behavior, I would be a little bit surprised, right? But that's essentially what happened in 1868.
Yeah.
He's taking a clause that was written by a bunch of people who were very much not in favor of even, forget homosexual marriage, who criminalized sodomy, right? Mm-hmm. And saying to them, okay, well, those people really meant, what they really meant here was pro-same-sex marriage. If you want to make same-sex marriage legal, make it legal. You know, that's what you can do through the ballot box. This is the beauty of a republic. But you don't get to have 9 unelected judges who are these special moral people who've been dinged by the hand of God. I believe all human beings are capable of good. I believe all human beings are capable of evil. I believe all human beings are selfish, and all of are capable of altruism. I don't believe that there are 9 perfect human beings who sit on the Supreme Court and rule us as a magical, angelic oligarchy.
I think that's a pretty solid ending to this. What do you think?
Sounds good to me.
Yeah, I mean, well, I think what we did here was exactly what I want this to be, that we don't have to agree on everything, but I do sense a sort of new center coming together with people that are on the right. That was my left, but you see what happened there? People that are on the left and on the right, that there's a way where you can be moral and it doesn't necessarily have anything to do with religion, or you can be moral and it has something to do with religion, but that's not how you want to be governed. And I think that's going to be my takeaway from this.
No, I think that's exactly right. I mean, as I say to people who disagree with me, the beauty of the country is that you don't have to care what I think. The minute you bring the government into saying that I have to care what you think, then we're at odds.
Yeah.
So as long as the government's out of it, we can have these discussions all day long, and it's just good fun. The minute you bring the gun to the party, you're the fascist.